Do keep your finger on your mouse because it's going to be a little bit interactive today, and I will be asking you some questions as we move forward. First of all, just a little bit about me. So as I said, I currently work for Pearson. I've been working in education for about 25 years. Started as an English teacher in Mexico many, many years ago. I've worked in English teaching there, teacher training, lots of editorial experience. I moved back to the UK about 6 years ago, where I started working in content development for Pearson, and now product manager or publisher, as you might know the title. So my background is very much in teaching, like yourselves. Anyhow, let's move on. We've got a little bit of housekeeping to do today before we get started. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, so there's quite a lot of information in there. Don't feel pressured to take notes. If you want to see it again, you will receive this between a week and 2 weeks after today. You'll be able to get a link to the recording and watch it again and go through it with a bit more time. So don't worry if you think you're going to miss something. You'll also receive a certificate for having attended today and a virtual goodie bag. So there'll be some treats and sweets for you today related to everything that we see. And then finally, if you can just think of any questions that you have, I'd love to try and answer them for you. If you can pop them into the chat box, we'll try and get through as many as we can at the end of today's session. Great, so let's get started. How to help your students meet their potential in PT General. So today we're going to be looking at lots of different approaches, and we're going to be talking about some courseware that might help you to achieve your students' goals. So first of all, we're going to look at a blended approach to test prep, teaching and learning. We're going to look at digital test prep and student goals and how that might be similar or different to other ELT learning. We're going to look at flipping the test prep classroom specifically and what that means. And then we're going to dig a little deeper into online and offline. What do we do when? How do we organise this process? We're going to talk about skills focus in the digital classroom and what are some ideas for how we can manage that. And last but not least, we're going to talk about virtual feedback and assessment, which is, as we know, one of the most important parts of this whole process. Great. So before we go any further, I'd really like to hear from you and find out a little bit about you. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Where do you teach? And what is your experience teaching online? So I'm just going to pull up a little poll here. And if you can just quickly take a couple of seconds to type in your answers, that would be really good. And I can get a little bit of information about who you are today. Okay, so we've got a little bit of everything there. We've got state school, private language school at the university. From home also, that's not a surprise in our current times and situations, right? And other as well. So I'm just going to share that with you there so that you can see. Not all you got to answer, but it gives us an idea that there's a lot of different kind of teachers here, so we'll try and cover lots of different scenarios so we can explore that a little bit together. Okay, great. So let's start today by talking about a blended approach to PT General test prep. This is all today going to focus around generic things to do with test prep, but specifically as well PT General. So going back to basics a little bit, why a blended approach? What are we talking about here? Well, each student preparing for the PT General test may have their very own set of circumstances. So you have lots of different things, but these are just some 4 key ones that I picked out. They may have very different reasons for taking the test. They may have very different preferences for ways of studying. This could include classroom study or online study or self-study or group study, lots of different things that people prefer. They could have very specific time goals for taking the test. So some people might have a lot more time for taking the test than others and therefore a lot more time to prepare. And obviously, again, as we are today, as we all know at home, restrictions on study location. So this is a very current and important key factor. And this is going to come into a lot of what we're talking about today. How do we structure our teaching to focus particularly on that factor? So what can a blended learning approach to test prep involve? Basically, for our purposes, we're going to think of it as any combination of online, offline, self-study or face-to-face instruction. So you've got some key ideas there. You have a little bit of classroom interaction here and instruction. It could be using print books and print materials, or it could be a package of different things, maybe a little bit of print, a little bit of digital, a little bit of a mix there. But very interestingly and very importantly, it also includes a lot of creative thinking, both on the part of the student and the teacher, and also a lot of collaboration. And we're going to come back to this collaboration idea today quite a bit. This is very important to what we're going to talk about. So what are the advantages for test prep of a blended approach to teaching and learning? Well, first of all, it can help students helps teachers plan to meet students' needs better. It can be very easy to personalize teaching and learning through this blended approach. If, for example, you think of a very large classroom, a physical classroom, it's often very difficult to meet individuals' needs, right? You might have 45 minutes or an hour of a class, and if you have 30, 40 students, you kind of can tweak things a little bit. You can find those tricks along the way to assign different things and manage the different levels and their different needs. But it's very, very difficult with those time restraints and the number of students that you have in front of you. On the other hand, if you have time where students are working away from you and they have their own time and can potentially spend more time on the things that they need to, this really, really can help you to assign specific things to specific students and really help them to meet their goals. So that's a really big advantage. Number two, supports individual learning pace with self-study offline tasks. We know as a fact from research here at Pearson that 90% of test takers prefer test prep that involves some kind of online or digital aspect to it, which is quite interesting, right? Because I think in modern life, we're all very used to using technology, using social media. Every day in our lives, most of us have devices or computers that we are using for personal or for work reasons, right? Or for study reasons. So it's not surprising that test takers are interested in doing their test prep online as well. And like I've said before, online study can give people a lot of space, a lot of time to really, really spend that deep dive time getting to know what they need to get to know to do well in the test. And last but not least, digital learning can offer opportunities for other skill development relevant to test prep. PT General is very much focused on skills for life, functional skills in English. How do you use your English in an everyday situation? And digital learning really, really gives a lot of opportunities for us to do that. For speaking and listening skills, if we're talking about having online classes or online activities where students have to participate in a very different way, not only is it going to take them time to get used to that, they're going to have to learn different skills that they may not learn as quickly in the classroom. So things like turn taking, interjecting, language for conversation, how to interrupt. These are things that students will learn in an online class because there isn't any option not to. Easy to build in real world practice. We have the internet at our fingertips if we're giving online classes, right? So there's so many things that we can bring in there, real world materials and real world practice that really kind of mirrors what they might see in the PT General test. Digital learning is very good for collaborative exercises, non-pressured work groups and peer feedback. Contrary to what you might think, it is actually quite easy to have collaboration online. And we'll look at that a little bit later today as well. And of course, the last but not least, again, online time and space has to be very focused. You usually only have a very small window where you have your students engaged with you online. So, that's very important to manage that and plan it. But that's a good thing for feedback and assessment because it means you may be getting the most attentive time of their study time. Great. So I'd like to introduce you now to our courseware, Practice Test Plus for PT General. This is a brand new piece of courseware which is launching in around 6 weeks' time. All of the content is brand new. It's all been written by exam experts. And it's a really fantastic, complete set of materials for teachers and for students. So we have 4 levels of the courseware, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they cover A2, B1, B2 and C1 levels of the PT General test. We have student materials, which are the ones that you can see in blue, which also have student materials available to the users online. And we also have teacher materials that have teaching notes and lots of other goodies that go along with that as well. This courseware includes print and digital materials, so it is a blended learning offering. We have print and ebook versions of the courseware, and we also have a lot of things online. So we have resources online on our Pearson English portal, which you may or may not know. We have speaking test videos which accompany the courseware, and we have practice activities on the Pearson English Practice app. And all of this package of things lets us make this material appropriate for lots of different kinds of users. It might be able to be used, and this is typical of Practice Test Plus in general, because Practice Test Plus does focus on other exams as well. And across the board in Practice Test Plus, it's really nice because it's flexible. It can be used in a classroom with a teacher. It can be used with a student and a teacher in an online blended environment. Or it can be used by a student who just wants to study on their own with no teacher. So it's really quite a flexible material. It's not a set course per se, so you won't find a kind of lesson structure like you would in other maybe ELT courses. It doesn't take you step by step with the number of hours or things like that that you might want to teach with. The planning really is down to you. And like I said, there's not one typical kind of user. This is generally used in many, many different ways. It's very flexible content, so you can really take bits and pieces of it, use the whole thing as it is. You can really use it to your advantage, especially in a blended learning environment, to meet the needs of your students. The nice thing about it is that it's divided into sections, and all of the sections have lots of really detailed guidance and tips on how to do the test. So it's ideal for this kind of situation that we're talking about. It's ideal for different purposes, different students, and like I've said, it can be adapted for lots of different situations. Oops, sorry, I seem to have gone backwards. See, the problem with technology. Right, here we are, digital test prep and student goals. So let's now focus on our students for a little bit. Students and PTG. What do we need to help them with? So I'm going to ask you 2 more questions here before we dive into this. And I'd really like to know, what are your students' most common goals while studying PT General? What do they commonly need to focus on? And when I'm talking about goals here, I'm not talking about the end goal after taking the test. I'm talking about while they are preparing, what kind of things are the things that they really need to focus on that you generally see in your classrooms or with your students. If you could pop some ideas into the chat box, that would be really good, and we can just see a couple of ideas from different people. They need to be more fluent. Okay, great. Speaking and writing is a big one, right? That's very challenging. Speaking and grammar too. Okay, listening. Grammar as well. Speaking fluency. It's one thing to know how to speak, and it's one thing to be able to do it efficiently, right? Comprehension. Okay, so some very varied answers there. So again, all of the students' needs are different, but there's some commonality there across the things that you're mentioning. It's good to see. So in terms of talking about blended teaching for test prep, we want to think for a minute about test prep blended learning in comparison to other English language learning. So think about blended learning for test prep, and then think about blended learning for your normal average ELT course. I want to raise my level from A2 to B1. what would be the similarities in terms of using a blended approach and perhaps more online digital stuff for test prep? So some of the similarities are, for example, that the individual needs and the goals are key. We know that. We know that we have to adapt our classes and our teaching to meet all of the learners' needs in the classroom, which is never an easy task. I know that. But that we know that that's at the heart of what we're doing, right? We also know that teachers often can't teach students individually. This is the same whether you're in a physical classroom or in an online environment or a digital environment, right? If you think about having, again, a very large class, it's sometimes very hard to give that student who really needs that extra support, that extra time when you have another 29 students to focus on as well. So that's the same across both situations. We also have the fact that some students are more used to or comfortable with online instruction. That's pretty much the same for an ELT course or a test prep course. And sometimes the teachers too. It's the same thing. One thing, again, is to know about social media and know how to use our technology that we use daily. But when it's unfamiliar, it becomes more difficult. And I apologize if I bumble through this webinar today and do my best to use this unfamiliar technology too. Goal-oriented instruction and learning essential to meet goals. That's the same in both situations. As we already mentioned a little bit, careful planning is needed for managing large classes. And that's, I would say, pretty much equal in both cases. And also in both situations, teachers need to find effective ways to assess progress on learning. We know that it's never going to work the same with every bunch of students or every class or even every course that we're teaching, right? So all of those things are pretty much the same in both camps. There are some differences as well, though, in terms of online classes and digital tools. So as I've mentioned, technology and technical problems can affect teaching and learning. It's okay not to be professional at it in the beginning. It takes some time. Test-specific knowledge. This is something where this online and digital blended environment is a little bit different to a normal ELT course. In a normal ELT course, you may have end goals that are various, but generally you're looking to improve your speaking, improve your 4 skills, improve your level overall, and just kind of really have that whole improvement experience. When you're studying for test prep as well, you have that, but you also have the test prep familiarity and knowledge that you need to gain. And that's a whole other level that adds on. Test strategies. It may be the case that some in-test strategies are easier to teach in the classroom than online. Some of these things that are very, very detailed and specific and really need working through with the student, it's quite hard to think about how they might translate to another kind of process or environment, right? So that's something obviously that we need to think about. And then again, effective feedback and assessment. In a blended approach to test prep, we really need to plan very carefully and very differently to a physical classroom environment how we're going to do this. It has to be more frequent, and as we'll see at the end of today when we talk about assessment, there are a lot of key factors that we really, really need to have in mind before we even start. So basically we can say here that we need to have a balance between 2 things. We need to have a very clear balance between personal skill and level development goals, which is one thing, and test prep specific needs, which is another thing on the other side. So moving on, we're going to talk about flipping the classroom, and we're going to talk about flipping the test prep classroom in specifically because it's again a little bit different to any other classroom. So flipping the classroom, this is not a new concept. It's just been around for quite a while. There's quite a lot of information about it. Just to go over it again in a very brief way, the idea of flipping the classroom is to turn it on its head, basically, just as you see with this picture here. So if you imagine a traditional classroom teaching and learning process, when the teacher is in the classroom with students, that's where most of the hardcore groundwork happens in terms of learning, practice, really understanding and grabbing the core concepts of things. and of course practicing, right? There'll be some feedback and assessment there as well, but that's the main focus of the classroom work. When the student goes out of the classroom and goes home and has homework or assignments or whatever, that's why they do the kind of review and consolidation and check a little bit more. There may be more assessment there from the teacher to see that they are actually have picked up the concepts and learnt everything that they were supposed to, right? In the flipped classroom, it's exactly the other way around. So when the student is at home on their own doing self-study, that is the opportunity for them to have that groundwork, basics, really the knowledge picking up part of the process. When they are with the teacher online or when they're doing interactive digital activities, that's more the time for reviewing, consolidating and checking that everything is okay. There may still be some practice there, but it's kind of the other way around. So that's the way we're going to be looking at it today. And for our purposes, we're going to talk about two different areas today. We're going to talk about offline. So when I mention offline, I'm referring to anything the student does on their own, away from the teacher. It could be using print materials or an ebook, or it could be using resources that they have or an assignment that they have, but it's basically self-study focused. It could include some peer work as well, but it's not with the teacher. And then online, this is an area where we're going to talk about anything that is digital, online, an online class, interactive, collaborative, and an opportunity for that kind of purpose. So you're going to hear me mention this quite a bit today. This is what we're going to be talking about quite a lot. Okay, so here we got our little thought fella again. I want to ask you another question. Can you tell me, please, in the chat box, what are some of the challenges you think you currently face in flipping the classroom? I'd really like to know, what are some of the issues that you think are current for you? Student distraction. No internet in students' homes. Yes, that's difficult. Makes blended learning very hard. Time consuming. Okay, distractions. Students don't do much at home. Okay. Not being able to see students' responses. Okay. Bad internet connection. I know all about that. I've got teenagers here. They're always using up my internet. Okay, some people can organise, some people can't. Engaging learners. Students are visual learners, so I tend to use the board a lot online. I don't know how to. Okay. Distractions. Reading. Lack of knowledge or programs. Okay. All right. So this is obviously a lot of things that we have to think about when we're working this out, right? This is clearly something that's not as straightforward as it might seem, right? Having digital literacy, absolutely. I like that term. I might coin that. Okay. So definitely, there's all very, very applicable challenges. I've also picked out, there's loads more as well. I mean, this could be a whole other discussion, but I've picked out here as well a couple of key ones that I think are really, really important. So one of them is that has to do with the planning for all of this and for flipping the classroom and how it's going to work. And the teacher really in the beginning needs to think about what they need to teach for test prep for PTG and what materials the students can explore on their own, what the students can do on their own, with all of these challenges in mind, right? So if you have, internet connectivity, digital awareness problems, or whether you have students that maybe aren't as engaged, and all of these things that you're mentioning there, long tasks, yes, some of them are difficult when they don't have a teacher there trying to motivate them to do it. So we really need to think in the beginning stages, how is this going to work? What do I need to be there to do with them? And what can I push them, motivate them to do on their own? And for that to be, the next point kind of follows on, for that to be possible, it's really essential to have materials that can clearly be used for this offline and online purposes. You really need to make sure that the materials that you have at hand are things that you can work with, split up, use in different ways, be really, really flexible with, so that they can meet your purposes and really make both of these things come alive. We have to be very aware in the planning stages that teaching some of the same content for a PT General test prep course might take a lot longer to teach in a flipped classroom through blended learning than it would in a normal classroom situation. This is because the amount of time that you have. Oh, you can hear my bird singing. Yeah, sorry. I'm at home, so I've got the birds in the back garden. Fortunately, the neighbour's not singing, which is a little bit worse. Anyway, sorry, the teaching might take a little longer. So if you think about only having a certain amount of time with the students where you have to get through a lot of things online, and the students having to spend a lot more time on their own doing stuff, it might just take you a little bit longer to get through that, that groundwork stage and really getting people up to speed. So put that into your planning so that you know things might take a bit longer than you normally would expect them to. And of course, back to the point we made before, we really need to make sure we have a balance of skills and test prep knowledge. Skills and test prep knowledge. It has to be running all the way through, consistently both. So, online versus offline, what to do when? So I've been talking about this a lot, online versus offline. It's quite hard to know what is the distinction. So I'd like to walk you through now with some ideas of how we can do this. First of all, my first piece of advice would be use materials and time wisely. Start by using what you know, in terms of technology, in terms of materials, in terms of activities or things that you might use in the classroom that can be tweaked or adapted to work in this way, in the flipped classroom with blended learning. Use those things first. Use those resources that you have. And do take the time in the beginning to do some research into the digital side. There are a lot of free resources online. There are a lot of paid subscription things as well. Some of them more expensive than others. But there's a lot of things out there that can be really, really useful, really make things engaging for your students, and also really save a lot of time and effort for you. And we'll talk about a few of them today. But honestly, take some time to do the research, talk to other teachers, because there are a lot of things that can really help you in this aspect. For test prep purposes, you want to really clearly distinguish between, in terms of material, online learning and consolidation. So self-study, detail, that groundwork that I was talking about, and online practice and purpose. So the interaction, the feedback, the assessment. You want to make sure that everything you do is in either one or the other camp. It might cross over a little bit, of course, but you want to make sure that they're very clearly identified in your mind. And as I've said there, you may have less time with your students online than you would normally, so you want to make sure it's productive, right? Make sure your materials fit yours and your students' needs. If a student is at home having to learn a lot of detail and a lot of kind of strategies around test prep for certain parts of a test or certain tasks in a test, and they don't have that kind of knowledge of the teacher there to fall back on, they're going to really need materials that help them do that, and they're going to need materials that really, really support them in that way. So again, offline versus offline, this is just digging a little bit deeper now into what we're talking about here. So offline, we've said these activities should be self-study, and they should be focused on three main things: test and section structure. So this is all about the test. What's in it? How does it work? What do I need to do? What are the expectations around the test, each section, each task type? What is all the information that I need to be able to succeed in knowing how to do the test? Then you have the enabling of the skill development, which I know a lot of you mentioned in the things that your students had as main focuses, right? The grammar, or the vocabulary, or the pronunciation. These things, again, need to be in the offline practice, the deep dive practice that the students are doing. And of course, consolidation of knowledge through extra practice. So this could be extra practice with the test guidance or with the enabling skill development. And then online. So this is what you do once the student has done that first part in any task area or whatever, then you move to some online. Remember, online could be an online class, it could be an interactive activity, it could be any of those things. So here you want to Review and seal the knowledge learnt and the practice is done. So whether it's general or specific or on a large scale or not. Excuse me. This is really what you're going to do here. You're going to support and concrete those enabling skills, so all that grammar, vocabulary. You're going to still do some practice in the online part. It's not that all the practice is done by the student on its own, but it's a different kind of practice. So the practice they do on their own is very much getting down to the roots of it and the nuts and bolts. The practice that they might do with you is more showcasing, performance, showing what they can do so that you can see and hear and read where it is that their gaps lie. Yeah, so that would be the productive skill practice there. And of course, answer queries, give feedback and assessment. So I'd like to go back to Practice Test Plus for PT General for a moment and just show you as an example some of the materials that it has that might help you with some of these things. So first of all, we're going to be talking about the offline side of things. I'm just going to walk you through the structure a little bit of how the book is put together and how you can use it and how it's not a strict course that you have to follow step by step. So Practice Test Plus, if you don't know it already, is a series because we do have it for Cambridge tests and PT Academic as well. Practice Test Plus has 5 complete practice tests in each level of the courseware. And these include not ready and ready test materials. So there's different levels of things that your students can use in terms of getting familiar with the test and then moving on to practice. So out of the 5 tests, tests 1 and 2 offer the not ready guidance. This is for someone who really doesn't know the test or is not quite sure about different parts of it. Test 1 and 2 is where they really get the nitty-gritty of the information. So test 1, we're going to talk about first. And in test 1, you have an overview of the test. Oops, sorry about my shape there. Bad drawing. It's not my forte. You have an overview of the test, which is a little bit longer than this, obviously, but it shows you the idea and gives you all the basic information about the test, what's in it, each part, what you have to do. And then for each section of the test, so listening, reading, speaking, and writing, you have an overview. And again, this shows you each section of the test, a little explanation about what you need to do, and it gives you some links to online resources where you can get more information and more good stuff. Still working on the offline in test 1. For each section of the test, you have how-to pages and you have training pages. So the how-to, again, tells you the skills that are tested in that part of the test. And then it gives you lots of tips and things on ways that you can prepare to do that section of the test. And then the training sections where we really get into the nitty-gritty. And it has all of these lovely practice activities that are focused on the tasks that come in test 1. So the student can look at the task in test 1, look at the guidance parts that they've seen before, and work through the questions and the exercises to learn more about how that task type is structured. So it's really quite a neat thing. Then we move on to test 2. Test 2 is a little bit lighter. It's a bit cleaner. It doesn't have that extra guidance, those extra guidance pages, but it does have for every task tip strips, which give you for each question little questions and little hints and bits of advice on how to do these tasks. And these nod back to the scaffold. These are kind of scaffolded guidance of the bigger guidance that you got in test 1. So it's kind of gradually nursing the student to do it on their own. In the back of the book for each level as well, we have 2 things which are really good for those productive skills that I know you were saying earlier that you want your students to work on, that they need to work on. So we have a speaking bank and a writing bank. In each speaking and writing bank, the information is based on one example from test 1 or test 2. You have exam help, which gives you further tips that don't come earlier in the book. You have useful language, which students can use to practice for that part of the test. And you have practice activities, which help you to look at that section of a test in more detail and think about it as well. And the structure is the same for both speaking and writing. And then we move, still in offline, but we move to the ready for test self-study stuff. This doesn't mean that they're actually ready to take the test, but it means that they're moving on more in their process and they can start to work on it on their own and really practice without those guidelines and tips necessarily there all the time. Tests 1 to 5 are clean tests. They have no tips on the page, no advice. It's just the tasks that come in each section. And in the back of the book as well, you have a grammar bank, which has lots of different level-specific grammar. This is from B2, I think. So you have lots of reference to either help students improve their grammar or just remind themselves of things that maybe they learned but they didn't quite remember. And then each section as well has its own section with a little bit of practice so that they can just refresh themselves. You may need to add additional stuff to this for different students with different needs, but it's just a starting point. Okay, so that shows you a little bit about Practice Test Plus and how it works. We're going to move on now to the 4 different skills areas, and I'm going to tell you a little bit around how we can use that material further to do this online and offline focus. So let's start with listening. You have here different sections. You have offline and online. So just to run through quickly, there's some different ideas here, and this is not the only way to use the material. It's just a suggestion. So the first one is assign test 1 to test 5 tasks, either in the paper version or in the ebook, and then use the downloadable audio or the audio on the app to do the exercise. So the app that accompanies the course has all of the audio, the video that accompanies the level, and it also has vocabulary practice activities from tests 1 to 5. It doesn't test all of the vocabulary, but it tests key topic vocabulary that has been extracted from there. So it's really nice, and they can use that audio either downloaded or on the app. They can listen to it while they're doing the exercises. The teacher can assign sections of the audio script that they have access to for specific task analysis. Maybe you want to take a little screenshot, part of it, maybe edit it, maybe just go through some analysis and talk about different things, how to answer the question, what are things that could be distracting, the language that is used, anything at all that you want to. So that's something nice to do, and that can be done, sent to students and have them do it at home. And then for the online practice for listening, there's lots of different things you can do. There's just a few ideas here. You could use screenshots again of the audio script to analyze the answers or create alternative activities, and these can be done with the students online in a video call or a webinar just like this. You could use audio clips from the internet to create real-world practice. They could either be audio clips or video clips without seeing the video. And this is really nice because you can get the opportunity here to show students things that are from the real world that they might see these kind of things in the test as well. So it's good to expose them to this stuff. You can do games like Dictogloss, which is basically focused on dictation, where you get a suitable piece of text. It could be from the book or it could be from somewhere else. And you read it at a little bit of a faster pace than normal. You could even add some a different accent there or something if you like, just to make it a bit more complicated. The student has to make notes about what they hear, read it, you read it again, the student has to do it themselves, then you have to check it together and whatever. You could even have students read it, and that makes the online class environment a little bit more interesting for them. And of course you can use excerpts of audiobooks as well for vocabulary building and listening fluency tasks. So that's just some ideas there for listening. For reading, again, something similar to start with. Assign tests 1 and 2 tasks, so that's the guidance part of the book, to review all of the details. You could select reading questions from the tasks in the book and supply them. Again, the audio scripts that you'll have will be in PDF or editable Word audio scripts, so you'll be able to work with them and do different things in order to play with those, which are really helpful in an online course because then you have extra things. You don't have to type it up and do it all yourself. You can assign students tasks to work with the vocab map resources available. So along with the vocab practice that comes on the app, students have access to maps online, which are based on topics per test. And it has lots of different topics, and it has loads of vocabulary that comes from the book, and that is also related and is not in the book, but it's kind of topic related. So it's a really nice way to expand a student's vocabulary. And you can use that as, again, for an activity, you know, edit it and do some things to it, or you can have them from there, have it as a stepping point to make their own. So it's really quite a nice thing to have. And of course, for reading, assign them tasks related to the grammar bank at the back of the book. That's really, really helpful. And then just an idea here for online practice. Use online content for expanding vocabulary activities. Again, a million different things that you could do there. Writing ideas. I've only focused here on online rather than offline because I wanted to highlight the importance here of the collaborative exercise. So remember in the beginning I was saying about how the online space is really where you want to have the students producing so that you can see where they're at, you can see what their needs are, you can see all of those things where you might need to give them a little bit more help and guidance. So you really want to make sure that you're having them write in different ways. It is, of course, good to have them write in their own time and supply those things to you so that you can look at them. But also maybe that, you know, it's difficult as well. That makes a lot of work pile up for you. So maybe you want them to do things in front of you so that you can see how they're forming the things as they would in the test. Gives you a better idea of what their process is. So you might want to do some things like online collective writing exercises. Lots of really simple tools. Just use a Google Doc or a OneDrive doc or some kind of live document where you can have students write things together. Maybe they write different parts of a paragraph, or maybe they work on a blog post, or maybe there's different teams building it together. They all have access to the same documents and then you share them. Lots of different ways to do it. And that's a good way to have pure assessment activities on the section 8 and 9 writing activities. You can have them do group blogging. Perhaps not on a live blog. Obviously, there's some restrictions there with especially younger students, but it could be a blog, again, a live document where you have it set up and you give them certain things to do and certain aspects that you want them to show how they're, you know, practicing those skills that they have learned from the self-study part. You could do individual live online journals. This is a really nice idea because you could have students comment on things that they want to, just write it as a journal, and they could also do some of their writing exercises there. So instead of sending everything separately to your email, which can get a bit hairy, you can have one live document for each student, that's their journal, and everything they do goes in there. So it's a really good way to keep it all together. It makes marking much easier for you, and also you can see their progress. So you can go back very easily and see what they did earlier in the term and how they are now. So it's a really good way to assess as well and see what they're doing. Sentence building games and true or false games focused on the writing guidelines. Maybe take some of those tips and trips from the book and do a true or false game with them. Maybe change a few and see if they can notice which are the ones that you've changed. Yes, absolutely. Gamification. Sounds interesting. Okay, speaking, this is something different. I just wanted to show you very quickly a sample pathway of how you might use the practice test plus materials through a certain amount of time. Again, this is not the only way. This is just to show you how they might work in the offline, online suggested routes for blended learning and for flipping classrooms. Excuse me. So for the offline practice, you might want to do things like assign study activities with test 1, all those useful, meaty guideline pages. Once they've worked on a section, so let's pick a section, and you want them to really see what they've been doing and see what they've been learning. You want to make sure you're having a frequent review of what they're doing anyway, and have lots of class activities to check and provide feedback. So you want lots of activities where they can do that section, do section 10, for example, and show you what they're doing. In terms of the videos, important to mention here, there's 2 kinds of videos that support the courseware. So you have speaking test videos, which I will show you in a minute, and that is of an examiner and a student doing the test. So it's split into all the different sections of the speaking test, and you can see them answering real test questions. They're real students, actually, from Poland, and you can see them doing that. And then there's another kind of video which is the examiner's video, and that's where we give more information about each section of the test. And they talk about the speaking test videos, and they give some feedback, and they talk about how the student did well and also where they could improve. So it's really nice, and that's a really good tool for using in this space, I think, because you can use it to maybe give some of that feedback to students, but it's not coming from you, it's coming from an examiner as well. So that's really good. Another way of doing things, you could assign students activities for test 2, which is where you have the tip strips. And then you can maybe look at some of the most important or challenging tips in class, looking at the challenging tasks, okay, as well. Review students' questions, give them quick flash activities, you know, quizzes, polls, pop quizzes, that kind of thing. And then, of course, give them that extended speaking practice in class and give them feedback as well. You can have the students use the test videos at home, which also come with worksheets, so they can work on the videos on their own at home. That's a really nice activity. It's quite engaging, actually, because they don't have to just write about it. It has worksheets that, you know, already formulated to ask them about it, and they can really get in deep to each of the sections of the test. And then again, when you're with the students or with interactive activities online, you can use sections of those speaking videos to evaluate their skill understanding, the areas that they think they need to improve in, watch them as sample answers, watch them and discuss, lots of different ways to use them. And again, the examiner's videos and concrete, all the information that they've got. I'm just going to show you a little bit of one of the videos. This is from C1 level, and this is the discussion part.
Now, Karen, we're going to discuss something together. The question is it better to work as part of a team or individually? What do you think?
I think that being part of a team is the best way to overcome any problems because of different array of skills that different people have. Of course, they come from different backgrounds, which means that they have experienced different things and can manage different problems in a different way.
They can bring in different skills, but some people can be difficult to work with.
Absolutely, but there are different roles in a team.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we have a good manager or someone that manages the team well, mm-hmm. they can keep everyone to their promises. Having to work under a bigger amount of stress or different situations is very motivating for some people, and they can take different roles in the team and mm-hmm. Help.
Okay. Don't you think that working independently forces you to push yourself further?
I don't think so. I think there is a lot to learn from working in a team.
How about a greater sense of achievement from working individually?
Well, if you work individually, of course, you're going to have a bigger sense of achievement. But a team can achieve so much more, which means even though the sense of achievement is a little bit less, as a whole thing, you can feel better.
So would you describe yourself as a team player?
Absolutely, yes. I love to work with a team. I love to see how different people react and help to achieve their goals.
Thank you very much.
Great. So that's just a little snippet there, sneak preview. Before today, nobody's seen those, so you're the first people to see it. Yeah, that's a little bit of the video. That's C1 level, and that's someone doing the discussion part. And then some speaking ideas. Again, I'm not going to go through all this now because I don't want to run out of time, and I'd like to get to some of your questions. But just some ideas here about things that you could do, different ways that you could do speaking in an online situation with the students. It's not as impossible as it seems. It needs a little bit more of thinking through and a little bit of creativity, because obviously you can't have pairs doing it at the same time on an online class, right, as you would in the classroom. It's a little bit different, but it is possible. Again, this is where it might take longer because you might need more sessions for everybody to have a little turn. But there are different ways of doing it, and very, very happy. Don't have a lot of time now to go through all of these, but if anybody wants more ideas later, very happy for you to get in touch, and I'll gladly have that conversation with you, because there's lots of different things that you could do. So last of all, virtual feedback and assessment, very important. Just going to leave this here for you to read. You just read that to yourself for a moment. So this is by Diane Conrad. I'm reading this book at the moment. It's really interesting. She's got some really good points of view. So if you like reading about this kind of thing, this book is definitely worth a look. And the bit that I like best about it is the first part. The end goal of better assessment is better learning. This kind of sums it up for me. This is what it's all about, right? And particularly in terms of PT General, which is a test that is testing, like I said before, functional English, skills in the real world, English as it is in the real world. We want the assessment that we're doing with our students as they prepare to do the test to reflect that and to make that learning better, so that they really do achieve those skills, right? And we're only going to get as good learning as the way that we assess it. So I like this quote. I think it's quite nice for our purposes today. Okay, so wrapping up, virtual feedback. There's a need for rich, detailed feedback in this kind of situation. So when you're using blended learning, when you're using a flipped classroom for test prep, really need to make sure that the feedback they give your students is really, really clear. It's never going to be the same having a consistent classroom presence with your students as it is having more time away from them, having them do more individual study, and of course having online classes or whatever kind of online interaction. It's never going to be the quite same as having them in the same room. So you really need to give them that rich, detailed feedback. And as I say a little bit later on, the feedback really should be written as well. Even if it's short and concise, it's really important that it's clear for them, and writing it down and having them being able to read it and look back at it is something that's really, really important. As well, there's more student and teacher feedback needed in a digital blended learning environment. This is because normally in a class they would have that kind of peer interaction where they would learn from each other, where they would, maybe be sitting next to someone who has a slightly higher level and be kind of learning things from them. They don't necessarily have this in the online environment. So it's really, really important that that student-teacher interaction, even if it's not spoken, is there somehow, that you give them that feedback. You need to identify how peer-student feedback will work. It's not impossible to do. It is still as important as it is in the physical classroom, but it was going to work differently, right? So we need to think about that. And also setting expectations is so important. Students, like I said, are very used to technology, very used to doing a lot of these things, but they're not used to taking classes online. They're not used to necessarily, in some countries or some places or some schools even, taking that responsibility and doing it for themselves. So you need to let them know what the purpose of this is, set the expectations, and really frequently give them grading milestones so that they can see how they're improving as well. That's what's going to motivate them to continue. Virtual feedback strategies. I won't dwell a long time here, but you have some different ideas. So you have ways to, sorry, wrong bit there, identifying challenges and needs is one side of it. And then there's an on-the-go assessment. So there's different things that you need to do. And you need to make sure that you have a balance between these two kinds of assessment. You need to have both things consistently in the course. So you can do things like all the things that you have here, weekly surveys, quizzes. There's loads of apps and things that you can find online. I think there's one called Moodle, which gives you, allows you to create quizzes for your students, but it also allows you to put feedback in there. So depending on the answers that they give or the amount of correct or incorrect answers that they can get some instant feedback from you as well. So that's really nice. That's a really good one to account for. Assessment and evaluation. This is a whole other webinar, so maybe we'll have to do this one another day. But assessment and evaluation, two very important just aspects that I've pulled out here. Regular performance assessments are essential. So this whole online part where you're asking them to do the productive, to show you the productive, to produce, to show you what they can do. This is really, really important. And not always, but sometimes you need to be assessing it. So there's lots of different ways to do this. Just a few ideas. This could be live, or it could be pre-recorded by your students and sent in if it's a speaking test activity. And also if a task type allows it, right? Of course, that depends on your students, you know, their capabilities and things like that, but that's one way of doing it. Also, speaking games that you can do with them that have elements of maybe the task for the speaking section that you're working on. So pick things out that kind of make them do those skills that they need to do that task. Monitor them carefully, assess them on it, and give them some feedback. You know, you can make up things like speaking chain games, which is a really common ELT game, but attach some language rules to it, attach some of those guidelines and useful language and things from the speaking banks. Use it with that and make it a rule where they have to, you know, use it in some way. And second of all, assessment feedback needs to be immediate, clear, and consistent. You can't wait to give your students feedback because they're just going to lose this interest, right? They're not in front of you in a physical classroom. So you need to make sure that you find ways to let them know how they are doing. And also use technology that helps you. I can't say this enough. All of these things that I've mentioned today, there's lots and lots of things out there. Again, if you do want some advice on some things, I'm not a master, but I can probably give you a couple of ideas. Question time. Right, that's enough from me. I would really, really, really like to find out, we've got 3 minutes left. What are some of the questions that you've been asking? I can see you popping lots of questions in. So I'm going to have a look here. Sophia's kindly put them together for me. This is an interesting one. How long do you think is the most appropriate for students to stay on a computer? It's an interesting question. Well, first of all, think about yourself. How long is appropriate, right? What is good for your mental health, for your eyes, for your, you know, brain to work? And certainly not longer than a normal class session might be, maybe 45 minutes. But also it depends on the age. There's really no answer to that. I think it's kind of dependent on your students. But yeah, good question to consider though. Will there be samples available of the Practice Test Plus and teacher guides available, and where, for online and offline? So the virtual goodies bag that I mentioned at the beginning today, you will have samples in there. I believe there are samples of each level of the student's book to be able to see all of these little bits that I've been talking about. It's not the whole book, but you've got snippets of a little bit of everything. We don't have the teacher's book in there, but that will be coming soon. The whole course launches mid-June to the end of June. So by the end of the June deadline, all of the books will be available. All of the ebooks will be available for purchase. And you can always contact your local Pearson rep and they'll be able to give you more information. Soon as well, in a couple of weeks, in english.com. Pearson website, there'll be a whole area there dedicated to this courseware, so you'll be able to find it on there. I think I'll probably get one more question in. In terms of engaged learning, what advice would you give when weak students take forever to complete a task and strong students might get bored waiting to do the next activity? Well, I mean, this is something that's kind of similar to a normal classroom, right? I think you have to have something else up your sleeve. So another little question to ask them, another little thing to do. It's not actually that different to in a physical classroom situation. But maybe that's as well where you need to look at what you're assigning the weaker student for offline practice. And maybe that's where they need to have a bit of a different you have to have maybe need to have a different approach to what you're giving them and compared to the other students to get them up to speed. But I do understand what you mean. There's lots of students who just need a bit more time, don't they, really? That's my timer going off. See if we've got time for any more. Okay, well, I think our time's up today. If you have any questions, there's a lot of questions I didn't get through. So if you have any that are really burning, please do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with the marketing rep from Pearson and they'll pass on the questions to me and I will get back to you. Thank you very much for coming today and I hope it was really useful.